Hello and welcome to Frames Team. As you're seeing, I have two very interesting lenses to talk about today. The 51.2 from Nikon and from Canon. I have been using these two lenses on my Nikon Z8 and I borrowed the Canon R5 II for a few days. I've been using this, loved using this camera. The review, the comparison of the R5 II versus the Z8 and also a standalone review of the R5 II is coming very soon. Today, let's talk about these two lenses. Why should we actually have this conversation? Why should we compare two lenses belonging to two different, systems? Is it completely relevant? First of all, there are a lot of people who actually have both systems. There are a lot of people who are thinking that I'll probably move from Sony or Panasonic or something else to a full frame system. And I love the 50mm focal length. So which one should I go for? Because maybe the lenses are what I go by, not just the cameras, because cameras come and go, technologies get refreshed quickly, but lenses, they stay around for a long time and they're the bigger investment because you probably will have two cameras and, 7 lenses or 4 lenses or 5 lenses. So, lenses are important. So it's good to know which company, which brand is doing what. Let's talk about the build quality, ergonomics, the feel of these lenses first. First of all, at the first go, the Nikon is a larger lens. As you can clearly see, the Nikon is a much larger lens. In the sense, it is a taller lens, almost like 1 inch. Yeah, about an inch, maybe inch and a half. The Nikon is a slightly taller lens, which means that when you're holding the Nikon lens, it feels slightly more front heavy compared to the R5 II and RF 51.2 combination, which is understandable. This is a slightly easier carrying, easier holding lens. Now the size allows Nikon to do a few things better than the Canon. First of all, look at the front element. The front element is so full. It's a large front element, and the lens has a filter size of 82mm. It's a pretty large lens. It's a wide lens and it's a long lens. Which means that it has very little distortion. I'll tell you, and of course you're going to go through the results, but it's got less distortion. So it's got an autofocus, manual focus switch here, a function button here, and a display here, which is very nice. You can see the distance to your subject. If you want to see that, you can also see your aperture if you want to see that. The large manual focus ring here is really, really nice. It's very well dampened, really nice to use this. Compare that with the Canon. Now, one good thing the Canon has is, there is this customizable ring is at the very front. So if you touch the lens here, you're not accidentally moving anything here. The Canon has one autofocus, manual focus switch here. It's also got a focus limiter here. You can restrict the focusing, mechanism to 0.8 meters to infinity if you're not shooting macro or if you're not getting close to the subject, so which is great. What I do not like about the Canon, of course, I like the fact that it is shorter in size. What I don't like about the Canon is that it's a 77mm filter size lens, but look at the size of the front element. It is really not that big, and I don't know why it's a big heavy lens, very expensive lens, but the front element is not as big. It looks like all the space was taken by the autofocusing system. The front element is not big and the front element moves, and the focus motor, it's fighting. It's really fighting. It's struggling. It makes not good sounding sounds. It makes weird noise. The Nikon, on the other hand, is quite smooth. It has that. Yeah, it's got a subtle sound, but it's very subdued. I mean, it's hardly going to travel to someone's ears. But the Nikon is also seems like, it doesn't have any focusing element protruding out of the lens, or you can see it moving inside. It's a well-built lens, properly weather sealed. You just feel like the Nikon lens is better built overall. The focusing ring on the Canon is quite loose, which is, I don't complain. I don't mind this. I don't actually mind this. The Nikon one is more better dampened. Let's talk about the image quality now. When it comes to sharpness, both these lenses are neck to neck. Both are 40 to 45 megapixel cameras. Sharpness is fantastic. But if you really zoom in by 200%, you're going to see that around the edges of the lines of the text, you're going to see that the Canon R5 II is showing a little bit of purple fringing. So yeah, at the point of focus on the RF 51.2, there's a little bit of fringing. You don't see that on the Nikon. What about LC or longitudinal chromatic aberration in the out of focus areas? A lot of people said, including Christopher Frost, that the Nikon 51.2 is almost apochromatic. It doesn't have any chromatic aberration, and that's not true. Both of these lenses have chromatic aberrations, and they're almost the same level. However, at f1.8 onwards, they stop becoming an issue. And after heavy edit, if you see a little bit of chromatic aberration anywhere on the point of focus, it's pretty easy to get rid of. I have done that for both these lenses. It's not a bother. What's good is that, starting f4 onwards, even f2.8 onwards, these lenses are close to perfect. They're perfect, essentially. F2.8 onwards, especially between f8 and f11, you see very little diffraction and therefore loss of quality. At f11 there is a little bit of that, but it's very little, very minor. And between f4 and f8, these lenses are so good. There is, however, one big weakness that comparatively that the Canon has. When you shoot against light, you see ghosting. You see loss of micro contrast. You don't see that amount of cleanliness and richness that the Nikon has. It's incredible how good the Nikon 51.2 is against light. I think that allows for so much more to happen with this lens, with the Nikon 1.2. It means that it's got less ghosting. It has got more contrast, therefore it preserves more detail, micro contrast against light. It also means that you're going to have more accurate color output out of the Nikon, and which is true. I mean, I've edited files from both these cameras using both these lenses, and in the end, I just love the fact that although at f1.2 the Nikon 51.2 vignettes, it vignettes nowhere close to the Canon 1.2. If you want an edge-to-edge clean shot, and you've shot the Canon at f1.2 wide open, you will have to really use on Lightroom. You have to put both the sliders to its maximum, 100% to the right and 100% to the left. I think there are two. One slider that takes care of vignetting, the other one kind of feathers or centers the starting point of the vignetting. You have to really push both those sliders to its maximum, to their maximum, to get a clean image output from Lightroom using the Canon RF 51.2. That's not the case with the Nikon. You have to use like 50% of both those sliders. So none of them are perfect, but the Nikon is far easier to manage, and you're pushing your files therefore much lesser. You're retaining much more detail. We talked about clarity against bright light and therefore micro contrast, therefore better color fidelity and all those things. Lastly, let me talk about the autofocus speed. I don't see any difference between these two lenses when it comes to autofocus speed. Both of them have strong motors. It's just that the Canon one makes more noise, which is annoying, and it feels like older technology, which is something I just don't understand, because in most markets, the Canon 51.2 is actually a more expensive lens than the Nikon 51.2. At least in my market, there's between a 500 to 750 US dollars difference in terms of costing of these two lenses to the consumer. So all in all, both are fantastic lenses. If you have to look at a 51.2 and choose the system, go for the Nikon. What about usability? Of course, like I said, when you're using the lens, these two setups, I liked using the Canon setup more just because it's a bit more manageable in terms of size. However, when I got back home and I looked at the files, when I started editing them, I don't know how to explain this. Some people call it 3D-ness, some people call it dimensionality. There's a depth and dimension to the images from the Nikon that I didn't see on the Canon. There is just something about Nikon images that made the Nikon files really stand out to me. And although it's a more heavier setup, and I was enjoying shooting the Canon more. Actually, I took more pictures with the Canon than with the Nikon setup. Therefore, but in the end, I actually enjoyed editing and getting the outputs on the Nikon more than the Canon. That could be a function of the cameras. If that is, then I have to give it a think, and I'll get back to you on that with the next episode where I talk about the Canon R5 II versus the Nikon Z8, and subsequently we'll also talk about the, if you want me to talk about, we can discuss how the R5 II actually compares with the Z6 III. So, like I said, there is just something about the pictures coming out of the Nikon files, the Nikon lens. There's a sense of realism to the Nikon output that it's uncanny. It's difficult. It's a bit difficult to explain, but there's this artistic look. There's this not just clinical. It technically feels like more perfect, but at the same time, it feels more artistic somehow. The Nikon 1.2S. So that's why I'm going to leave this discussion. Let me know what you think. Let me know which system you're in, and if you're looking for a 51.2, which one are you considering? The Canon has 51.2 and the 51.8, and now they have also got a 51.4. The Nikon system has a 1.8S, a 1.4 non-S, and a 1.2S. The Nikon system can also adapt. For example, the Sigma 51.2 or the Sony 1.2. So tell me which system you're in, what you thought of this comparison, what's your opinion. If you have questions, if you want to see me do something else, what do you want me to talk to you about, let me know. I'm going to see you soon. Help me grow this channel by subscribing to the channel. Please like the video, it really goes a long way. Help me reach 8,000 subscribers. I'm going to see you soon.